And that is why, in my view, we need a very different approach. Across the country, communities are already pushing back against the unchecked expansion of data centers. More than 100 localities have enacted moratoriums or restrictions, and states are beginning to take action as well. Importantly, and this is a very important point, leaders within the AI industry have called for a pause. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and I understand what is at stake. That is why today we are announcing legislation to impose a moratorium on the construction of new AI data centers until strong national safeguards are in place to ensure that AI is safe and effective.
So Bernie Sanders has done it again. He has decided to come forward and crap on the American economy by proposing a moratorium on AI data centers based on all the reasons that have become popular from people who listen to the TV and get mad at the things the TV tells them to be mad at. And that is, of course, the water usage, environmental impact, and of course, our electric bills. And he has decided that the only solution to these problems is to cut off data center reconstruction completely. That's what a moratorium is, until Congress can come up with a ridiculous and absurd regulatory package in order to control this. And if you actually look at the legislation that he put forward, even if they were to come up with these regulations in the next administration, the moratorium could not be lifted until you had yet another act of Congress deeming that it needs to be repealed. And of course, this is a shot directly into the heart of the U.S.'s burgeoning AI economy, which, by the way, according to economists, 35 to 90% of the economic growth from last year comes from this particular sector. So it's all of our growth, and in addition to that, China's not stopping. So essentially what Bernie Sanders is trying to do is cut the U.S. economy off at the knees, turn it over to the Chinese, which again is not surprising if you know anything about the history of Bernie Sanders. Now, of course, he teamed up with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is very likely to run for president of the United States in the next coming cycle. And yeah, this could be a major problem if somebody like this were to get into office, because if most of our economic growth is tied to this, if everybody knows that AI is the next big thing, or at least has a strong feeling about it, the US falling behind would be disastrous. Oh, and by the way, everything that Bernie Sanders says about this is completely false, overstated, and ridiculous. So this is what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
Who is aggressively pushing these technologies? Well, surprise, surprise. It happens to be the very wealthiest people on earth. People like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Peter Thiel, Bill Gates, and other multi-billionaires. So here is a very simple question I'd like you to think about. Do you believe that these guys, these multi-billionaires, are staying up nights worrying about what AI and robotics will do to the working families of our country and the world? Well, I don't think so.
This is the populist slop that I absolutely cannot stand, and it's also one of the reasons why that despite the fact you'll hear other people talk about how, well, at least Bernie Sanders is authentic, at least Bernie Sanders means what he says, that never was appealing to me in any way, shape, or form, because if you're authentically terrible, if you're authentically a socialist, if you are authentically anti-American and anti-Western, then guess what? That doesn't do a lot for me when the people running in your party, or at least on your side of the political spectrum, are also anti-American, even if they are a bit more disingenuous about their rationale why. A true believer is incredibly dangerous, and this is one of the reasons why, of course, Bernie and AOC have decided to push forward on this platform. Now, I had referenced in a recent video that I actually did related to Caleb Hammer, the NPC response against data centers, how ridiculous they're getting, and how seemingly overnight this opposition has cropped up, even though, again, this would clearly and obviously be detrimental to the United States economy. And by the way, I had also talked about the fact how these environmentalists are going after companies that are building up chip manufacturing in this nation, because again, the goal, the feature, not the bug, is to do damage to the United States of America. Again, I also did a recent video on how Greta Thunberg is actually not a hypocrite, despite what people say, because she used to be a part of an organization called Stop Oil, and she was giving obnoxious speeches where she said, "How dare you?
How dare you?"
And now she's demanding oil be sent to Cuba, even though, again, oil was supposedly so evil it was going to destroy the world in just a couple of years. But if you understand that it was never about the environment and it was always about being anti-American, anti-Western, and anti-capitalist, you'll understand that these positions are actually totally 100% in line. And again, this is reflected by Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders. And a perfect example of this is their complaints on energy prices, because supposedly, as we hear from the NPCs, energy prices are going up dramatically due to the fact that AI data centers require significantly more power.
And what are they asking for now? Endless energy. These companies are now so desperate to profit off of the AI boom that they are racing to construct thousands of giant AI data centers and jacking up the utility costs of everyday Americans to pay for it. These data centers power thousands of high-intensity computer chips that are processing at all times and require massive amounts of energy to operate. Just one hyperscale data center consumes the same amount of energy in 1 second as 100,000 households. Because of the massive amounts of energy they use, power and water utility companies must build multi-billion-dollar infrastructure to keep up with the demand. And these companies are not paying for their own energy infrastructure. People's energy bills around the country are skyrocketing in order to pay for these AI data centers for them. In the last 5 years, Americans who live near data centers saw their electric bills increase over 267% each month. We are talking about a monthly increase from $80 a month to $294 a month. Working people are already living paycheck to paycheck, in some states off of wages as low as $7.25 an hour, another federal minimum wage that Congress also refuses to raise. They simply cannot afford another increase to their monthly bills. And this results in people cutting corners whenever they can to keep the lights on, whether it's skipping meals or rationing their insulin. And while the American people are suffering, big tech continues to demand more. More data centers, more energy, more data collection, more American jobs replaced by AI, all on the feet of the American people to pay.
Now, in the short term, in certain places, this is 100% a definite possibility. Again, if you're putting in new things that consume a lot of power into the same grid, then that will ultimately end up leading to higher prices for other people on the same network. But one of the things that I found fascinating was this map of energy prices across the United States of America. And you will not be surprised by looking at this map to see for yourself that the states that limit new energy production, new energy facilities, shut down nuclear power plants are actually the states that are seeing the greatest increase in energy prices, not the states that are doing the most in terms of AI. And the great thing about this interactive map, which by the way will be linked in the description of this video, is the fact that they actually give you the baseline of inflation of 23%, which is the midpoint of the chart right at the top, but it is also made clear on the bottom. So everything above 23% is an increase faster than the rate of inflation. So we go to Texas, which has technically seen their energy prices go up, and what we find out is that 4% of the increase is above the rate of inflation. So they're at 27%, but 23% of that is in fact inflation. Compare and contrast that to California, a heavily regulated state that is not as freewheeling with AI data centers, and we see a 66% increase in inflation. Remember, 23% of that is regular ordinary inflation, what you would expect to see, meaning 43% of the increase increase in inflation is, of course, due to the fact that they are regulating the crap out of their energy sector. New York State, my home state, Ocasio-Cortez's home state, 36% increase in energy prices. So you subtract the 23% and that is up 13%. And that's the reason why Governor Kathy Hochul is trying to put a pause on a bunch of these environmental regulations going into her next election, because prices are up dramatically. Also, Massachusetts, guess what? 33.9% increase in energy prices. And essentially every state that you would expect to see energy prices skyrocket due to bad regulations has energy prices skyrocketing to bad regulations. But the states that are red states, that are data center states, have only seen marginal increases by comparison. Also, this doesn't factor in the plan to build a new energy capacity and who's actually going to pay for that build if given the chance. In fact, these companies, Apple, Microsoft, and a bunch of these other places that are building these data centers are actually advocating for the ability to set up their own power system that would actually not only power the data center, but would actually increase energy supply to the overall grid. So in reality, what we could actually see in many states that don't hamper this new energy production is energy prices go down as a consequence of these AI data centers. And shockingly enough, one of the things that we're also seeing is the reopening of nuclear power plants. There's a Palisades plant in the state of Michigan that closed in 2022, and it's going to be the first nuclear power plant in the history of this country to be reopened, to be restarted. And the reason why is because it's being used to fuel the AI data centers. Now, nuclear power is clean energy. It doesn't produce carbon. It actually works, which is why many left-wingers are against it, including, by the way, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, whose Green New Deal very famously was against nuclear energy, because again, it's about crippling the American economy, not about the environment. It's about inducing suffering in the American population, not prosperity. And yeah, so that's happening right there. We also have a reopening of a reactor on 3 Mile Island, which I believe was shut down back in 1979. That's going to power a Microsoft data center. And again, we have the restarting of nuclear projects that were previously canceled, like this Tennessee naval nuclear project that will again boost energy capacity across this nation. And by the way, this is a trend that we're seeing worldwide. So it looks like possibly the demand for energy will not only increase energy capacity, which will lower prices for all of us, but it's actually caused people across the world, including in Asia, who, by the way, after the Fukushima meltdown ended up cutting off a lot of their nuclear reactors, to turn back to nuclear. So we might actually get clean energy out of the AI revolution, which of course is obviously a reason why Bernie Sanders and all these different people are against it, because the whole point is limiting consumption. These people are what you call degrowthers. They want to reduce economic growth because they believe that us living lavish lifestyles is a sin against planet Earth. And even if we're doing so in such a way that's in accordance with planet Earth, they're finding ways to be against it. I mean, when has AOC come out and said that she supported Indian Point, the nuclear reactor that's north of Manhattan that was shut down, that at certain points was providing 25% of the power to Manhattan, reopening? Never. Absolutely not. She's been against it. All these different lefties are against it because, again, the whole point is to hurt the U.S. economy, not help it. I mean, the Duane Arnold Energy Center in Iowa, which is a nuclear plant that was decommissioned in 2020, is also looking to be restarted. Again, this is a nationwide thing, and it's extraordinarily to the benefit of the American population. Also, in addition to that, the water usage for AI data centers is completely overstated. And the reason for that is because it's about 1% of the fresh water in the country, which is significant, but it's less than what it actually costs in terms of water to maintain lawns. And in addition to that, because these companies don't like paying for water, they're trying to build these closed loop systems where they don't have to tap the tap in order to run these data centers.
And across the country, Democrats, Republicans, and independents are standing up. People are standing up to big tech and saying no to these data centers being built in their own communities. More than 100 local communities across 12 states have already enacted local moratoriums on data centers, and Congress itself has a moral obligation to stand with them and stop big tech from ruining their communities. Our legislation in the House and the Senate would hit the brakes on construction of new data centers until we address several of the key areas of harm AI poses.
I also want to point out how ridiculous and absurd that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, of all people, is the one proposing this and saying that she's offering solutions when this woman is a complete and utter fool. Remember back in the day when she first got into Congress and everybody was promoting her in everybody's faces, and she released this video from The Intercept about how, oh, in the future, we're going to have all this green energy and the Green New Deal is going to be in effect. Well, part of the plan that Ocasio-Cortez actually has in order to save the environment is not to rely on scientists or anything of the sort. It's to rely on Native American magic to heal the land, because generationally they have a connection to nature that we don't.
Of course, when it came to healing the land, we had huge gaps in our knowledge. Luckily, indigenous communities offer generational expertise to help guide the way.
Yeah, I'm not sorry to say, when your ultra-woke ideology essentially has you doing the natives or noble savages and basically one with nature, and therefore through the generations they have magic powers in order to live with nature, I'm not really going to take you seriously on environmental issues, and definitely not on economic policy issues, because guess what? Native Americans, they just happen to be like regular people. They're not magic. They don't got the witchcraft. I mean, sure, if you bury something in a Native American burial ground, it will come back to get you. So watch where you bury your pets, folks. But other than that, there's no magic. But the reason why AI data centers could be so wonderful in terms of energy capacity in the United States of America is because they're turning to nuclear energy for a reason. It's because they need something that is consistent, that actually works, that actually consistently produces in order to operate these centers. And the fact is, nuclear energy has been proven time and time again to be that consistent thing. But the thing is, because nuclear energy is so consistent and reliable, and green energy like solar and wind is so unreliable, that leaves us in a bad position if you want to push the subsidies in that direction. Because guess what? In order to have both like they have in France, they actually have to lower their nuclear energy capacity on purpose in order to incorporate the solar and wind. And by the way, they do this in France, which makes no sense, because if the goal is carbon-free energy, something like 90% of the French grid is powered by nuclear and thus is carbon-free energy. And we see the absolute perils that Germany has been in ever since they cut their nuclear reactors, which is the path that Bernie and AOC and all these left-wingers actually want us to go on. So what we're seeing right here is not an attack on AI data centers. I mean, it is, but underneath the surface, it's an attack on nuclear energy, because as we look at the numbers, as we assess the situation, even when we factor in this absolute rage that the left wing has directed towards CO2, what we find time and time again is nuclear is where it's at. It is the safest power, fewest deaths per kilowatt hour. It actually becomes the cheapest when it's up and running, and it is among the most reliable. And the people behind data centers, which again are responsible for a huge percentage of American economic growth, know that, so they're using that leverage that they have in our economy in order to push us forward in terms of nuclear energy, which of course would lower prices. Bernie Sanders' policy would kill that investment. In fact, if this actually got enough co-sponsors to the point where this was going to threaten the industry, even the threat of this regulatory burden would reduce the amount of AI data centers in this nation, and again, further direct the world away from the United States to China, which is essentially a global surrender. And again, this should not be surprising. Bernie Sanders, it came out after the Soviet Union fell, was considered a dupe by the Soviets. They actually lured him to the Soviet Union to do propaganda on behalf of them when he was the mayor of Burlington, Vermont. So yeah, this guy has a long history of doing this exact sort of thing, and we should not take him seriously because he is not smarter than the people who are actually progressing our economy forward. Now, Bernie also talks about managing job losses and other things like that, and yes, I understand those concerns, but the fact is, a moratorium on AI data centers, all it's going to do is hurt our competitiveness worldwide, cause more of this stuff to be outsourced, and those job losses are not going to be prevented by him doing this. You can't artificially hold the world back by limiting the United States of America, despite the fact that Bernie Sanders wants to try. You can do some policies if you are so inclined in order to compensate for potential job losses, but you can't do that at the expense of growth, because if you don't invest in the next technology, if you don't move forward economically, you're going to be like all the crappy third world countries that they call the global south that are also significantly behind. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social media, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Bernie Sanders sabotaging America. Till next time.